Hello, hello. I am going to show the latest updates to my personal LinkedIn agent that decides how to process my LinkedIn invitations, either accepting or ignoring them based on my own personal criteria. So let's just go and dive into the demo and watch it happen. So I've told it to process my top 30 notifications. So it opens up my LinkedIn and it starts looking at each of the invitations, and for each of them it decides whether they're technical. It looks at their number of connections, looks at whether they're a recruiter, because I don't typically accept connections from recruiters, looks at whether they look at work at Microsoft, right? So it's trying to decide based on my own personal criteria whether this is somebody that I would accept, right? And it's mostly whether they're going to be talking about stuff that I find interesting, which is on LinkedIn is just technical stuff for the most part, right? So you can see here it's accepted all of these folks, and I would agree with all of its decisions. Let's see if it'll find anyone interesting that it's not sure about, because when it's not sure, that's when we're going to see the new feature where it does a little deep dive. So far, all of these folks are very clearly technical or well connected. Let's see. As you see, this is more efficient than me doing it, because I always overthink everything. All right, so in that case, it just clearly accepted everyone. It didn't have any ones that it wasn't like it couldn't make a decision about. So I'm going to run it again to see if we can get a demonstration of what happens when it cannot decide. There's only a limited number of times I can run this demo since I don't have that many invitations left. So we'll see. Let's see this one. Okay, so it wasn't sure about Rahul. It opens up the profile and then it says accept, because it saw that they were a student with technical education, and it saw that they were aligned. So that's just what I want to show, is that when it is undecided based off just what it can see in the invitation listing, it opens up that profile, reads the whole profile, sends all that information to the LLM, and then the LLM has much more context for making a decision. So it looks like a lot of the folks here, it was pretty clear. There was another one where it wasn't sure, and it opened it up and said, oh, well, they work in data center supply chain, and that's technical, so decided to accept them. And we're getting close to the end of actually all my invitations, which is great. I had like 600 invitations that I hadn't processed yet before I ran this agent. Okay, so there we go. And at the end, it can say all the decisions. So in this case, it did end up accepting everyone after it had done the profile deep dive. If it had ignored or was still undecided, it would have listed those here. But instead, it listed everyone, and we can see their profiles and whether they have mutual connections. So let's go ahead and look at the code. So what we can see is first we set up a connection to OpenAI. We can use Azure OpenAI. We can use OpenAI.com. We can even use GitHub Models. So you could try this out for free. So you can use any of those options for trying out this agent. Then let's go down to where it actually starts. All right, so here's the actual function where we tell it how many invitations to process. And we're using Playwright. So Playwright is a browser automation library. I use it a lot when I'm running end-to-end tests, but also people have found it really helpful as an MCP server and for writing agents, because sometimes the easiest way to interact with something is via browser automation, especially if there's not a good API available for what you want to do. So Playwright will try to go to my feed, and if it is unable to go there because I'm not logged in, then it'll direct to the login, then wait for me to log in. So that would be me actually typing in my username password. And once I am successfully logged in, then it'll save my cookies into a local file. This is, of course, in my git ignore, because I do not want to save any of my cookie information into the Git repo, right? So if you ran this, it would be saving your own personal cookie information for that browser there. And then when we start the browser, you can see it actually pulls from that file. So that's how it's able to be logged in. The thing about Playwright is that Playwright is not allowed to automate your main Chrome or your main Edge just because of browser policy. So if you do want Playwright to interact with a logged in website, you do need a loop like this, which is going to do the login, save that state, and then restore from that state. All right, so once we're all successfully logged in, then we can go to the invitation manager and wait for that to load. LinkedIn is a very JavaScript heavy website, so we do need to always wait to make sure it's fully loaded. Then we start querying the invitations. Here I'm using a CSS selector. Generally, Playwright prefers to use like user visible text in order to do selections, but in this case, I wasn't able to find good user visible text that was consistent. So I had to use CSS selectors, but that does mean, of course, this is very flaky and dependent on these CSS selectors staying the same. So I may have to update this in the future if they change their HTML and their CSS. And that's one of the big issues with doing browser automation. So we find all the invitations and we go through and process it. So we get the profile link, we get the job title, we get the mutual connections. And then we send all that to the LLM and ask for a decision. So going up to this function, this function does a chat completion request where it says, okay, you're going to decide whether to accept or ignore. And it's using tool calling to do that. So I'm using tool calling with a pedantic model here. So it says, okay, your tool call needs to have the decision, which is either accept, ignore, or undecided, and it needs to have a reason. It's always really, really helpful to have your agent give a reason, right? Really, really helpful. So always try to do that if you can. So then we get back the response and we parse out the response. And, this parsing code's a little messy here. I tried using the agents framework, but also had issues with the agents framework. So I decided just to use tool calling and handle the parsing myself. So if we're going to accept it, we click accept. If we're going to ignore, we click ignore. Otherwise, we might still be undecided. So let's go back to where we called that, see what happened next. All right, so we make the decision. Now, if the decision is still undecided, then we're going to go off and get the full profile information. So that opens a new tab, looks at the profile, grabs everything there, and sends all of that to the LLM. So this is a much longer message. It uses more tokens. So we only want to do it when needed. And then we get the final decision. And that final decision could still be undecided. And at that point, it's up to me to decide. So we go through all the invitations. This is an infinitely scrolling page. So if we are at the end of invitations and we still want to process more, then we will do a force a scroll and wait a few seconds for the new cards to load and then get more invitations. And then at the end, we have a report that says accepted, ignored, undecided, and then we are done. So there you go. That's the code. That's the idea of the agent. This shows you just generally how you could write a personal automation agent using the Playwright browser automation library. Now, if there's an API that you can do the same functionality, I do recommend using an API. I think that LinkedIn may have an API that can do the same thing. So I will port to that if I realize that it has all the functionality that I need. I wanted to use Playwright just to kind of show that as an example. And I also just like how Playwright really makes it clear that I'm the human in the loop, right? Like when I run this, I am watching it go. Like I can run Playwright in a headless mode. But in this case, I like running it in the headed mode, meaning I can see the browser, because then I feel like I'm really, really in the loop, right? This is what I'm calling like human really in the loop, right? So I am watching it happen both in the browser and in the terminal and making any pending decisions. So I'm very actively engaged with this process. But as a general rule, if there is an API to do what you want to do, it is always best to use the API. It is going to be the most direct, most efficient, most specific, and most stable. So in the future, hopefully I can build some agents, personal automation agents using APIs to show you what that would look like instead. All right, that's all. Bye, everyone.